Hello there, my name's Valerian and we're going to go over building your first hover vessel that will enable you to find ore, point of interests, and a good base location. The reason we build a hover vessel before we build a base is that generally we only have enough resources in the starting area to build one tier 1 base or tier 1 vessel. We usually are not level 7 by the time we get those starting resources, which is required for flying a small vessel. With a hover vessel we can get it at level 3 or 5 depending, so logically building a basic hover vessel to get you around first is a generally good idea. Get a hover vessel first, then use it to get the resources you need to make and find a base and a small vessel later on. That is usually a good strategy. So let's do that. I suggest starting a new creative mode game where you can easily build your starting vessel, then blueprint it and build it in survival. So let's pick creative. However, if you want a fun challenge, you can also do it in survival, though it'll take longer and it'll be harder to follow along with the video since we will be building in creative for this video. Make sure you start on a planet when making hover vessels. Since Alpha 11, it can be done in space, but it's a lot easier making it planet side. So make sure your started location is on air planet, empty world, no or yes, it really doesn't matter, and then hit start. First, we need to hit the H key and click the hover vessel icon at the top right of the window that pops up. So hit H. Then we need to click devices right here. This shows us most of the essential devices we will need to make the hover vessel operational. Now, before I continue, I want to state that this video will teach you how to build an operational hover vessel, but it will not go over how to design a hover vessel. Just bare bones minimum, bare bones parts, no carbon blocks or anything, just the parts and that's it, and make it operational. So it's up to your preference what you want the hover vessel to look like. However, that being said, if you copy what I'm doing here, you will get a hover vessel that works. It just won't look pretty. So in addition to telling you the bare essentials to make your first vessel, we will also go over some options after you're finished. So we need to look at every single device and put a few of these in our inventory before we start building, so it's less likely that we will miss something. So hit the H key. We want a hover vessel starting block, so for some reason this only shows up if you select all objects instead of hover vessel. So if I click the hover vessel filter right here and go to devices or blocks, it doesn't show up. The hover vessel starter block doesn't show up. But if I have to go to all right here, all objects, and then it shows up, which is really weird because you'd think you click the hover vessel filter and the hover vessel starter block would be included in the blocks that you can use that show up, but no, you got to select all objects to do it. So if you can't find it right away, make sure you have all objects selected and you have building blocks selected as well. Select hover vessel again and back to devices tab beneath the hover vessel tab. So now we can start picking from this list of devices. Basically, it's kind of a list. It's more like an organization of sorts, but basically we go down the line here and we will need a generator. So this guy, let's click him. A fuel tank, click on that and just go down the line here. 2 small thrusters, click that. 2 RCSs, cockpit blocks, 4 medium thrusters, 4 1x1 hover engines, not the 2x2 but the 1x1, and a detector. This guy right here. That's really all you need to build a basic bare minimum operational hover vessel, with the exception of a detector, but you will need it to find ores and POIs, so there's no point in not having it. Now once you have these in your inventory, go ahead and start putting them on your hotbar. So it looks like we have everything we need on our hotbar and we didn't need to put anything in our inventory. Now that you've done that, go ahead and watch me build a hover vessel with these blocks. I will also go over what I'm doing as I'm building. So first, we lay down the hover vessel block. Forgot to grab that. There we go. And so, okay, when you place the hover vessel block, see that arrow on that 9x9 block that appears? The arrow points to where the front of the vessel is facing. This is very important that you do not lose sight of where the front of your vessel is or you'll have problems. I'm not going to go into details of what happens, but it basically, it screws up the vehicle. You won't be able to fly it right. You won't be able to build it right. It won't. Make sure that you know where the front of your vessel is at all times. Left click to place it. Then since we are in creative mode, we can, with the block selected in our hotbar, delete blocks that are touching our reticle by holding shift and tapping right click like this. There, just like that. Replace the 2 blocks with the generator. So this guy right here, use your rotate keys to place the generator down like I did here. You just use the delete and end keys. Delete changes the direction that it rotates and rotates the block. So want to rotate it like that. You might want to check your key bindings. If the delete and end keys aren't responding, it might be a different button, but that's what it is for me. Go ahead and place the fuel tank down like this. You'll get the hang of it as you go along. You just have to keep practicing placing blocks and removing them and stuff, and you just have to practice building. You'll get better with time. You'll get a feel for the game. All right, then a couple RCSs. So take the RCSs, place one right here and one right there. Next, we will place the cockpit down. Before we place it, we are going to right-click with the cockpit blocks in our hand and select what cockpit we want to place down. So select the cockpit, put it in your hand, and then you're going to right-click, and you're going to choose from this selection what you want. Now, I suggest you just look at every single one and pick what suits your fancy, but notice that these two right here, these are open. This means that it will not be supplied with oxygen when you enter the cockpit, for obvious reasons. It will not hook up to your oxygen tank. The rest of these cockpits should open up to your oxygen tank and should use your oxygen supply. So you don't have to use your suit's oxygen supply when you're in the ship. So for right now, we're gonna pick the Cockpit 5 Legacy and we're gonna place it right here. But really, you can choose whatever you want. Go ahead and place it down. So we place that down. Next, we'll place the hover engines down in a rectangle-like pattern like this. So basically gonna go select it. And we're going to make a rectangle, so we're going to put one here and here. If you connect these with a straight line, it makes a rectangle. You basically think of it as like these are the legs. Think of it as like the legs. You get the idea. You basically want to evenly distribute the hover vessel so that it encompasses the entire area of the vehicle that it's supporting. So with thrusters, you need them in 4 directions for hover vessels: forward, backwards, left, and right. Go ahead and place 2 medium thrusters forwards and backwards. So select our medium thrusters, and we're just going to go like this. Place a small thruster left and right like this. So same thing, take the small thruster and just make sure the thruster part, the exhaust, is pointed outward. Make sure the exhaust port is facing you. Not this flat circle part, but this is the exhaust port. This is what the exhaust port looks like. So, and you'll be able to tell if it's the exhaust port or not because a blue jet will be coming out of it when you turn it on. You will generally need more power going forward and backward than left and right. So it's easier to strafe left and right, but it's basically you're going to need more power to push the vehicle forward at top speeds. You won't need to strafe at top speeds that much. Unless you want the vehicle to be extremely maneuverable, it's okay to have less thrusters on the sides than in front and back. But the forward thrusters, which usually are in the rear, they push the vehicle forward, so you need a lot of thrust to make the vehicle go fast. They make the vehicle go forward, and then the backward thrusters, you know, they're basically your brakes. So when you're going forward and you hit the back button, you know, you hit the S key, they'll fire and they'll slow your vehicle down and to a stop, or they'll reverse it depending on how fast you're going. So yeah, they're also your reverse and your brakes. You gotta have strong reverse thrusters or you're not gonna be able to brake as hard and you won't be able to back it up very fast. So, and trust me, you will need that. And last but not least, place the detector down so we can detect ores as we cruise around the planet. So grab our detector and just go bloop. So there are some options going forward. First option, you can just leave this as is and start cruising around the planet looking for ores. Second option is put a container controller and some extensions if you are playing with mass volume on, even though I highly suggest you don't for your first playthrough. The weight system makes this game a lot more difficult, so don't do it until you're familiar with the game and want to challenge. It's not even on by default anyway. The next option is to add a harvester onto the front of the vessel. This way you can harvest wood with your hover vessel. Make sure you add a ore and wood container controller along with the harvester in order for this to work. Now I'm not going to show you each one of these things because that would take another 30 minutes, but you can easily look into this list and check out all the devices for the hover vessel and look up all the parts that I just suggested. So your first option, you know, is to just leave it as it is and go cruising with it and use it as transportation. The second option is to put a container controller on it, which is this right here, and put extensions on it to give it some cargo space. So the harvester, again, harvester is on weapons and items with the hover vessel tab selected, or hover vessel filter selected. Here's the harvester module. You're going to need that. The best way is on the front of the vehicle. I don't know why you'd have it on the sides or the rear, but who knows? Everyone's different. I usually put it on the front. You also need an ore and wood container controller to make it work, and if you want some extensions, if you want to chop down a lot of wood. You can also put a Gatling gun or two on the vessel for defense and for taking down pangolins and triceratops for more XP. So that would be Gatling gun right here in weapons and items. Obviously you want them facing the front of your vehicle. You're going to need a container controller for ammo to use the Gatling gun, so keep that in mind. The other thing you can do is put a mobile constructor on the vessel. Make sure you add a container controller too if you're going to do that. If you do this, you need to link the container to the constructor like this. We'll place down a mobile constructor just for demonstration, and this will teach you how to access any of the container controllers. Place it down, and then we're going to get a container controller. And you access the mobile constructor, make sure you click this down arrow, click container controller since it's available on the hover vessel. This is a drop down list, so it'll show ore and wood, it'll show fridges, it'll show other container controllers. Make sure you pick the one that you want the mobile constructor to work with. It has an input selection and an output selection. So this is the container controller that it's taking the items from, and this is the container that it's putting items that it makes into it. You can also put things like a fridge, an oxygen tank, and an O2 station on there. Be careful if you have CPU mechanics enabled. If you have it enabled, you won't be able to have all these things at once with one core. However, if you do disable CPU mechanics, then starting a new game, you can add all these things to your vessel. Just make sure you have enough RCSs and thrusters to move it around with all that extra weight. So yeah, to reiterate, the heavier the vessel is, the more RCSs you're going to have on it. And RCSs take up a lot of CPU. They'll easily take up the most amount of your CPU if you don't have a mobile constructor, after the mobile constructor and other high CPU items like a warp drive. The more blocks you put on the ship, the slower it's going to turn until you're going to need more RCSs to compensate. Same with thrusters. The more blocks you put on the ship, the more thrusters it's going to take in any direction to move it around. So keep that in mind. The last thing you'll want to do after you finish a vessel is to test it. So get in here like this and turn it on. We're going to have to fill up our inventory with some fuel packs. So we'll just grab some of that. Hit the P key to fuel your ship. Select fill all. Though you might want to go into manage if you're using biofuel, because you may not have enough biofuel to fill the whole tank. Just remember that. But we have enough fuel in this case, so turn it on. So does it move around well? Forwards, backwards, side to side? Well, let's take a look. Forwards, it moves pretty good, and it stops pretty good. Backwards, it moves pretty fast. Forwards, it moves pretty fast. Side to side. Now remember, for side to side, here's a trick with side to side. You know you need more thrusters on your sides if it takes forever for you to change direction moving from side to side. So I'm moving right, I put down the left thruster, and look how long it took for me to get to for me to start strafing left. So if it takes you forever to start strafing in the opposite direction, then you know you're going to need more side thrusters. Does the vessel move well with the mouse movement? So let's see, how easy or hard is it to turn with your mouse? This seems okay. It's borderline of needing another RCS, but if it was like turning like this, like I'm moving my mouse all the way over and it's only turning like this, that's how you know you need another RCS. Probably a couple or more, probably multiple RCSs to get that thing moving if it's that slow. So, but for this vessel, 2 RCSs, as you can see, is plenty to move this thing around and drive it where you want to go. And really, honestly, though, you're not really going to get it. I mean, you can get it to turn super fast, but the problem is, if you're playing with CPU mechanics, the more RCSs you put on, the more CPU you're going to use. If anything is too sluggish or slow, you might want to consider putting on more RCSs and more thrusters, as always. After that, the only thing left to do is design the ship. If you wish, I recommend carbon substrate blocks for your first vessel because they're very light and easy to work with, but they're very, very weak as far as armor is concerned. Be aware, though, that the more blocks you add even cosmetically, the heavier the vessel will be, the more RCSs and thrusters you will need. So beware of that. You know, you might want to build a fancy ship, but just remember, the fancier ship that you build, the more RCSs and thrusters it's going to take. So you might want to sacrifice on looks a little bit if you're a little limited on resources, just to get the ship out the door and get it running. But for now, that's it for the video. I have a Twitch channel. Stop by and say hello sometime. We also have a Discord and we are active. Come join House Valerian. If you want to support my work, I have a Patreon page. Go ahead and check it out. Links are in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.